So John Bolton was on, what is it? Face the Nation? Is that Jake Tapper's show? I believe it's Face the Nation. Yeah. So he was on Face the Nation, and there was a moment where Jake Tapper actually was a journalist. Every now and then Jake Tapper floats into journalist territory, and then usually he quickly floats out of it. But this was pretty great, and it's the type of thing that obviously I think we would push a lot harder, but it's the moment where you kind of wish, whenever like John Bolton or Mike Pompeo or one of these guys or Dick Cheney, any of his people, whenever they're on a show or being interviewed, I always find myself kind of wishing this question got asked or this got asked, or thinking about what I would grill him on if I had him in front of me. And this was actually one of the type of things that me or you might say to John Bolton if we had him. And so I thought it was interesting. So let's just play Jake Tapper's question. Very good question from a journalist, and then we'll pause it after that.
You tweeted on Friday about Venezuela's Nicolas Maduro, quote, "Those who continue to support a dictator that violates human rights and steals from the starving should not be allowed to walk around with impunity," unquote. Just as a matter of course, and this didn't start with the Trump administration, the United States supports any number of dictators who violate human rights, including the leaders of Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the UAE. Should those who support those dictators not be allowed to walk around with impunity?
You know, I've put
so that was an excellent question, Jake Tapper. So you just said people who support dictators shouldn't be allowed to walk around with impunity. The problem is you're one of those people. You're one of those people. We support dictators all over the place. In fact, America has a long track record of supporting dictators, and you would support all of that. In fact, America supports a lot of the dictators who we later turn on, like Saddam Hussein. All right, we were happy to give him a bunch of fucking weapons in 1980 because he was fighting the other guys who we didn't like. We gave $40 billion to Mubarak in Egypt. We gave just an ungodly amount of weapons to Saudi Arabia, and so there you have a direct contradiction. I thought that was an interesting. Now here's the thing, right? We point stuff like this out all the time, and it's interesting to think, since these guys never really get asked this stuff, or very rarely if they do, and we're leading toward this war now with Venezuela, which is quickly becoming one of the most important issues, to do whatever we can to try to stop from entering into another disastrous war. I mean, how insane are we to think we should go do this again? So, but here, John Bolton, this is very clear. He says in a tweet, you cannot support dictators and walk around with impunity. Okay, but we do support all these dictators. How do you deal with that contradiction? It's interesting. What's the answer to that? All right, let's see what John Bolton's answer is.
Roughly 150 tweets on Venezuela. This is a new experiment in public diplomacy. The fact is that we are trying to rally support for the peaceful transition of power from Maduro to Juan Guaido, whom we recognize as president. And I think since most of my tweets also come out in Spanish because we want to reach the Latin American audience in particular, that a lot of people, especially on the political left in the hemisphere and around the world, now understand that the failed experiment of Hugo Chavez and Nicolas Maduro needs to end. So I'd like to see as broad a coalition as we can put together to replace Maduro, to replace the whole corrupt regime. That's what we're trying to do.
Well, certainly Maduro is
so
beautiful. Doesn't address one word.
Can you imagine just being that guy, or you're just like
speak to the positive.
You literally might be speaking to somebody else. He didn't even he basically just goes like, "Well, yeah, but I want regime change."
Yeah, he ignored it.
Yeah. What was that? What I'm saying is I want regime change. But I like right away where he goes like, they go, okay, well, you just tweeted something which is in blatant contradiction to your own policies. You can't support a dictator, but that's clearly not the standard because you support dictators all over the place. He goes, well, I put out a lot of tweets, and Twitter is a new experiment in terms of communicating. My tweets are also translated into Spanish. And you're like, wait, what? What the fuck are you saying? Okay, so Twitter is a new platform, or it's a new experiment in communication. Okay, how about this one? The written word. Text. Like, that's what Twitter is, right? I mean, okay, it's shortened, but you wrote this. Like, how about that? Do you have more experience with writing? He goes, well, it's translated into Spanish. I go, yeah, but we're looking at the English version of it here. Well, what we want is a peaceful transition of power. It's like, oh, okay, that's great that you want that. None of this had anything to do with the question. However, I'll give some props to Jake Tapper. Let's keep playing the video.
It's nobody that I would defend in any way. But
Well, that's good to hear.
But do you not see that the United States' support for other brutal dictators around the world undermines the credibility of the argument you're making?
No, I don't think it does. I think it's separate. And I think, look, in this administration, we're not afraid to use the phrase Monroe Doctrine. This is a country in our hemisphere. It's been the objective of American presidents going back to Ronald Reagan to have a completely democratic hemisphere. I mentioned back at the end of last year that we're looking very much at the troika of tyranny, including Cuba and Nicaragua, as well as Maduro. Part of the problem in Venezuela is the heavy Cuban presence, 20 to 25,000 Cuban security officials by reports that have been in the public. This is the sort of thing that we find unacceptable, and that's why we're pursuing these policies.
I only have a few more seconds, but I want to ask you about Venezuela.
I got to pause for a second and ask, the Monroe Doctrine, we don't really look at that favorably historic. Like, we don't look back on history and go, that was one of the great things our country did, is it?
Well, essentially, I guess we do.
Am I wrong on that? I mean, I don't...
Well, I think people who aren't insane don't, but yes, that's more. So he goes, but he starts the question by saying, but don't you think that our support for all these other dictators contradicts the statement you just made? The statement is anyone who supports dictators shouldn't be able to walk around with impunity. It's like, he goes, no, I think they're separate. So now we're talking about the Monroe Doctrine, just shifting it right over. It was just a great moment of reinforcing the obvious truth, which is that there is no answer to that question because it pokes a hole. It doesn't poke a hole in a little bit of their bullshit. It pokes a hole in all of their bullshit. All of their bullshit. Oh, we just want a peaceful transition of power. Oh, we just care about democracy. Well, clearly you don't care about democracy. Oh, well, we just care about democracy in our region now. Because, but you're the same guy who supported the war in Iraq and is pushing for war in Iran, supported the war in Syria, and you use the idea of democracy there too. So don't give me the region shit either. That's not what it's about either. Okay? So obviously, it's obviously not about human suffering. I don't care about fucking human suffering, but we're going to sell weapons to the Saudis to go fight a war of genocide in Yemen, but we really care about the human suffering in Venezuela? Oh, well, I guess we only care about human suffering in our hemisphere.
You see, Jake, I'm trying to sell a war over here.
Like, you might as well
And
just
in the Middle East, they're just not for it anymore. And we can make these claims, but the American people just don't buy it. So now we're focusing on our own hemisphere again.
You know, there's really not that many Browns left to kill in the Middle East. We've slaughtered a whole bunch of them. But then I found the South America place. It's just full of Browns.
We totally forgot.
I mean, what's, you know,
We were just overlooking this treasure chest right in our backyard.
Holy shit. I thought there were just, you know, there's some Browns in the northern part of Africa and the middle part of the East, and then you find this whole fucking continent full of them. Well, let's go to town. I like go. So you want war in Venezuela? He goes, nah, dude, Nicaragua, Cuba. I got all types of Browns I want to slaughter, bro. I mean, like, I hate to, like, make it a cartoon, but what else do you say to someone who just gets asked? I almost admire the skill because I would not ever be able to do it. I would not be able to be asked a direct question and answer as if you asked me something completely different.
It just takes some training.
That's a true political skill.
You just got to speak to the positive. Ignore, and, you circle to the positive.
Yeah, I'm not even against circling to the positive. It's responding as if you asked me a different question than what you asked me that I just find so sleazy. So sleazy.
Got to sell some used cars, Davey Smith. You get real good at this.
It's just like if you were like, Dave, where'd you buy that jacket? And I'd be like, being clothed in the winter is very important, and many people have frozen to death throughout history. And all I'm trying to say is that cargo shorts are the and you're like, but what? I asked you where you bought your jacket. What the fuck are you talking about? And now Jake Tapper, this is where he's not a good journalist, is that these issues are, look, I give him credit for actually asking a legit question, and then I give him credit for following up after he evaded his question. But it's like, there is no question that if you had someone like, if it wasn't the fucking neocons in the Trump administration, but it was, say, the more of the immigration hawks in the Trump administration, the follow-ups would be much more intense and if he was talking about a wall and someone just evaded his question like that, he would have a much more intense follow-up question than what he had. And it's not just the follow-up. It's a matter of letting them off the hook and not going, you know what I mean? And not going, but sir, you said this. And you're talking about someone who's advocating leading us into another war while we're currently bogged down in the longest wars in American history. The 2 longest wars in American history, plus 4 or 5 side wars that are going on. And you're talking about leading us into another war. And you're clearly lying about why it is that you hate it. Well, we just don't support dictators. We just support democracy. Okay. Like, you've been fine with overthrowing democratic leaders. You've been fine with supporting dictators. So clearly that's not what this is about for you. You would just expect, I just wish we could get a little bit of the anger out of that, a little bit of the emotion out of that we got out of, say, Trump calling you fake news. Because this is slightly more important than that. That would be my take. Anyway, John Bolton is an evil lizard person, but we all knew that already. We all knew that. Okay, changing gears, a separate subject. I want to talk about this, and then we will get into the questions from the inner circle. So there is this fellow, Andrew Yang, who a lot of people have been asking me to talk about. Did we spend a little bit of time talking about it, the UBI with him, or no? Or did we never get?
I seem to remember people hit us up. I think he was on
When
Rogan.
he was on Rogan. I didn't get a
address it,
chance to watch,
but I don't think we
Rogan.
actually got into it.
Okay, so he was on Rogan. I guess he was talking about the universal basic income, which is this big. So he's running as a Democrat, and I believe, I don't want to get this wrong because I didn't actually watch it, but I'm gathering this from what a lot of people were tweeting and messaging me about, that he said he thinks he can get a lot of libertarians to support him. And I think there are some issues that he's actually pretty good on. I don't know. I don't know that much about him, but he's running for president on the Democratic ticket for 2020. And so I guess it's worth, talking about him a little bit, especially since so many people were asking me about him. But here he is on Fox News, and he's arguing, he's advocating for the universal basic income. If you're not familiar, the universal basic income, there's been a bunch of different propositions under the umbrella term universal basic income, but the idea is, as it says, that everybody would get an income from the government, so taxpayer money that everybody gets automatically, universal, meaning everybody gets it. Of course, it's universal nationally, I assume, which already kind of pokes a hole in the description of the name. If you wanted actually a universal basic income, which there is, if you want to talk about it from like a moral point of view, and you wanted to talk about like a global basic income, there's actually a far better argument, right? That people in like sub-Saharan Africa or something like that need some money than poor people in America. There's far poorer people all around the world. There's, the poor people coming over here from Mexico, there's people that make those people look rich in the world. A couple billion of them. Yeah. And so if you wanted to really be consistent with it, it would seem like maybe that's where you would go with your argument, would be a global, not universal, I suppose, because I don't know if we're going to be giving poor people on Pluto income. But if you wanted to go global with it, where there's a much stronger moral case for it, that fine. But then just be honest and say, my plan is that America should drastically reduce its standard of living for all of its citizens to dole out money to people in third world countries, which probably won't solve any of their problems anyway.